Hi, welcome to the next session of our spring webinar series of 2023 at America Outdoors Association. Pleasure to have you with us. It does take a couple minutes for all of our attendees to join. So as that's happening, I'm just going to lay out a couple of ground rules for those of you who are in here. We're happy to take questions anytime during this hour-long webcast. If you have questions for me or for our interviewees here, please don't hesitate to either post them into the questions box. If that's a struggle, you can post them into the chat box. You can also raise your hand if you want to ask a question over audio, and we can undo the muting that is in place for you right now. So we're excited to have you engage with this conversation. And I'm excited to have these two special gentlemen here, the winners of our Wendt Industry Achievement Award of 2022, Bruce Winter and Bill Gloeckler. Thank you so much for joining us, gentlemen. With Arizona River Runners and Grand Canyon Whitewater. So I just want to kick this off with a little bit of stage setting, and then start to ask you gentlemen a few questions so you can enlighten us to your long and illustrious career in Whitewater. So indeed, in Orlando for our conference of 2022, we're able to have both of you down here and recognize you both in front of the entire community through our Industry Achievement Award, which we award once a year, and have been doing for quite a while to individuals such as yourselves who are outstanding in the field, but also large contributors, I should say, to the industry in general. So you've been pretty selfless throughout your careers, and to get there, I think I want to just start from the beginning, which is like you've got such a long, remarkable story. How did it all begin? And Bruce and Bill, whoever wants to start out, if you could tell us a little bit about how you came together to get this on.
Go for it.
Yeah, well, in 1966, a friend of mine that I was playing some ball with in high school asked if we wanted to be river runners, and a few of us said sure. And then his brother was starting a river company. We actually had to muck out a chicken coop and get it ready to go. That was his warehouse. We had terrible equipment, terrible everything, terrible trucks. And we ran the Stanislaus, Tuolumne American, that kind of thing. That's what got us going. He then went to Idaho. We ran in Idaho and then in Utah, and by 68 in Grand Canyon. So for me, with his name was Henry, he was owner of Whitewater River Expeditions. For me, I just went to him and asked, just said, hey, I'll be your guy in Grand Canyon. And something about the place kind of got a hold of me, and that's the rest. That's history. It's 58 years running rivers. It's 55 of those in Grand Canyon. We've been hauling year in and year out. We have not let go. I also then went and did a subcontracting company with Azra, and we did their motor program. Bruce then approached me, and he had been working for Whitewater as well, and he came to work for Roll Call, our company in Grand Canyon. And then he started to talk to me about doing the San Juan, get a permit, because we had been kind of thrown out there by the Park Service because we were subcontracting. And it turned out ARR had this, when they were a small company, were available, and Bruce's brother-in-law got involved, and then the thing about boatmen is, especially boatmen, is there's no money. You have no money. Well, this guy did have, and it's his brother-in-law, and a wonderful human being in our book, and he sponsored the darn thing, and it kept, for whatever reason, it kept growing. Another one came up, so we pursued that. Those were combined. Another one came up, and these aren't easy permits to get in Grand Canyon. I mean, they're really a rare thing. They don't come up much. So when they do, everybody's in the mix. And so this climb has been steady, and very fortunate for us to be in the positions we're in. Bruce sells them, I run them. Our life is good.
I'll add a little bit here. I am,
Yeah.
in 1970, I graduated from college and our family did a raft trip down the Grand Canyon, an 8-day trip. And you have to I looked one day to figure out how fast the Grand Canyon rafting had grown. And you see it all the time. In 1949, only 100 people had been down the river. And by the late 60s, the end of the 60s, only about 5,000 people had been down the river. And in 1970, about 5,000 total. And in 1970, 5,000 went that year. In 71, about 10,000 and about 15,000 in 72. And it just grew so fast that the companies didn't really have anybody. They didn't have boatmen because there was no long history to this. So I went on this trip in 1970 with my family and I got to know the guide. And he said, "Do you want to come back and do another trip?" And I said, "Sure." And then came back and did another trip. And it was the end of the summer and I had saved up a lot of money to just from the summer job. And I said, well, gosh, there's books out on Europe on $5 a day. A couple of friends of mine said, well, we're going to Europe. And I said, well, I got $1,800. So the three of us went over to Europe and we hitched around a while and realized it was going to get cold in the wintertime. So we got a car for $300. We each put in $100. And I traveled around for 9 months before I came home on my $1,800. But we stopped in the train station in Innsbruck, Austria, and went in to get directions to find the youth hostel and met Bill there in the Innsbruck, Austria train station. And we got to talking about, and Grand Canyon came up in Arizona. And so he traveled with us for 3 months and then he went home and started the season. And I came back later the next summer and it was too late to get a complete job. But Bill said, I'll get you a job in 72. And so I actually started with Whitewater River Expeditions in 72. I had 3 trips. I had 1 as a passenger, 2 as a helper. I'd hardly ever driven the motor or even guided at all, but I'd been down the trips, but I qualified with the Park Service because I had 3 trips. And they gave me a boat and 15 people on the boat. And then thank goodness, they put on a guide from Idaho that knew river running and could read water, but didn't have 3 trips, so he couldn't go alone. And so the 2 of us kind of helped each other down the river the first time. And it was pretty adventurous back then because anybody that had 2 or 3 trips was a senior guide, was somebody that had a lot of experience. And so it was quite a learning experience for that. In 1972, the Park Service stopped giving new permits and anybody that was in business could keep going, but they couldn't start any new companies. And that's kind of, all those companies knew that was coming. And so they were taking as many people as they could down the river. So that's how I got started. I do have one story I think is kind of interesting. I drove up there in 1972. I drove up to Kanab, Utah, where the warehouse was. And I got across the street and there was a sign that said, Phoenix, I came from Phoenix. I grew up in Phoenix. The sign said Phoenix, 358 miles. And I looked at that and I looked at the warehouse and I went, I don't know what I'm doing. This is crazy, Bruce. You've been on 3 trips, 1 as a passenger, and you're over here saying you're a boatman. And I about drove home. I almost said, this is crazy. I'm going to go home. And then I thought, no, that's crazy. I just drove 300 miles to come up here. I'm going to go in and check it out. And to me, that was a turning point because I could have easily turned around and went home and just said, no, I'm going to give it a try. And 5 days later, I was guiding my first boat down Grand Canyon, which was crazy. I didn't have enough experience to know how to do that. So that's how Bill and I got started. You remember all
so
that?
Bill,
Absolutely.
when you both met in Austria, Bill, you had already done some guiding?
Yeah, I had already done 4 seasons and Grand Canyon was in that mix. So back then they couldn't sell a season anywhere, but they could sell a trip somewhere. So Idaho, Utah, we would just hop on the back of the truck, Aldi, wherever it was, do those 2 trips, move to the next state, do those 3, move down and do a couple over here. And it was marvelous. It was the best. I mean, holy crap. We didn't know the rivers. We didn't know shit about anything. Can you say shit on this? Okay.
You just did.
Yeah, we didn't. But you know, you learn, you grow, you flip, you hang up, you get them off, you keep going, you know, that kind of thing. And so it got built into the industry. It's still that way. That's the beauty of our business. It can get you anytime. Mother Nature's like,
And
got you now.
it was different back
Yeah.
then in the sense that they were filling the dam and we had low water and high water the same day. We had no experience. And the reality is the people had expectations. If they were thinking that this was a trip that if they made it to the end in one piece, that was a successful trip. They didn't have that high expectations.
Let's bring them back alive was definitely the thing that we were
So
tuned into.
they were a little hardened customers than we have nowadays. But it was kind of a Wild West show because again, rafting not only was growing in the Grand Canyon at that point, but that was when rafting started pretty much everywhere. You know, Utah, Idaho, California, all those things were just opening up and finally permitting people to run those trips. So it was really the very early stages of that ball game. And then we also had such a shortage of boatmen. There was times when we've been on the river 40, 50 days where we'd get off a trip, they'd fly us back in the small plane. Somebody else would do the orientation and we'd get out of the car and drive up and say, well, here's your guides, and away we'd go. So you'd sleep on the river 40 nights in a row. And so it just was a different time back then, but pretty exciting to be honest with you.
Yeah, 53 days out of 57 for me with Henry in 71, because back to back to back. In 71, the park decided whatever you run this year, that's going to be your allotment. So outfitters were selling trips for $100, just get bodies down there and back to back to back to back. So you took some of that equipment back with you. And so this was quite a show that they put on. Then the next year, that was it. They cut all that out. Here's your permits. Here's the amount of user days you'll have. And then we went forward from there and got a little more sanity in the system.
In 1971, they said they were going to do a moratorium. So that season, everybody tried to get as many days as they could because then that was going to be the cap.
Exactly. Yeah.
I think it was actually 72, but close enough.
Okay.
72.
Might want to reference that.
I know that because that was my first year working on the river. So that was a crazy year, but it was 72. And then
sounds like if you could survive that, you could survive any season.
Well, that's what that helped, of course. Yeah, it pushed it along for sure.
Yeah.
But we're dealing with the federal government here too. They have their rules and things. It's their canyon. We just work in it. It's that kind of thing. So you have to, especially from a subcontractor standpoint, that's a bad mood. We have 14 years and then you guys are out. Yeah. No, I even went to them to apply for the winter use, which wasn't being used at the time. I thought, oh, we'd have exclusive to ourselves because nobody goes there in the winter. But they are now. Lots of privates in the winter.
Right. Yeah, which seems to be maybe the solution for privates in general. To look into those broader seasons, and we can get into that in a little bit later if you want to too. But I wanted to ask, given those early days that you had guiding for Whitewater, I think, as you had said, it was hard to come by guides, and you were loving your life and also working really hard. What lessons from those early days did you carry over when you took on Arizona River Runners and later on Grand Canyon? Were there? I guess what I'm asking is how you were treated and respected, and how that translated to how you work with your staff.
I'll take a shot at that. I think we both thought, number one, good equipment is important because we just didn't have that. So from the very start, we wanted to have good equipment. But I think more than that is we had a great time on the river. We enjoyed every minute of it. But from a standpoint of pay or watching out for us in any way, that was not part of the deal. There, by the end of the 70s, there was quite a few boatmen, and we were, I don't know that we were treated badly, but I think we wanted to, when we finally had the chance to get a company, that was one of the things, is try and see if we could actually make this, instead of being a summer job that you did for a couple of years and then moved on. We thought this should be for people like us. We wanted to make it a living. We wanted to somehow treat our guides in a way that they could make it a living too. That it just didn't have to be a summer job for 2 or 3 years where you're graduating from college and then you went on to do a real job. And so don't you think that was one of the main things we felt at that
There's
time?
no question about it, because with Henry wasn't, how can I say this nicely?
Generous.
He wasn't generous. That's putting it lightly. And so, but it was work. It was a job, and this was his demands. So what we did was we took that, and that's what we didn't do with our guides in terms of treatment and how you pay them and showing respect and the fact that you're, making the guy a living, a pretty good living even then. So that's where it came from. It was a beat down, we were burning daylight boys, he's just that kind of guy. And that was nothing more to say about it. He was what he is, but we didn't hold on to any of that. We respected our own clan and our own group and thought we can do better at this. So we created programs that have made it better for them, no doubt about it. And it's becoming a living now. It's starting to where guides can come, make a living. Maybe you get a ski season in too as well. Get that other season filled up, make sure you're year round. And then it becomes a real good living. Yeah.
I think the other thing about that, not only trying to work with our guides, but the Park Service, they were making it up as they went along too back there in the 70s. And I can't blame them. Everybody was new at it. The rules were changing and things were happening. And you didn't always agree with the Park Service. You always had issues with the Park Service about the way they implemented rules. But we also felt that part of it, besides being fair to our guides, it was important to us to work with the regulators. And, they were trying to do a job that was tough too. And they were kind of making it up as they went along too. And we kind of took the approach that, just be honest. If you mess up, don't do something right, don't try and hide it. If you get questioned on something, be honest, be forthcoming. And, we found that really made a difference in the agencies working with us, that they knew that if somebody reported that we did something and we did it, we'd fess up to it. We'd be honest about, hey, we're going to try and do better. We're going to train. And I think that was a good part of it too, is in fact, that was when Bill came up with the idea of actually running cooperative trips with the Park Service for resource protection. And
yeah, we sold that to the Superintendent Chandler at the time. One of the Park Service created its own river unit. So, and they were kind of hostile to motors, but they were, they had it was a good place for them to express themselves to us and us to them. So we had more talks on river that led to this program where we did 40 or 50 trips probably in terms of resource management. That was great for the place. You're just, they need attention after a season when lots of people have gone down there. So, these kinds of things we did in the winter, and we did a whole bunch of different programs that has worked to this day and still is.
Trail maintenance.
I was thinking it was something like tamarisk removal or something like that, but it seems like there's a whole lot more going on than just.
Oh yeah, they didn't go there. They should have, but they didn't go there. But they had park sites, trails, multiple trailing.
Beach erosion.
And then of course vegetation and stuff. So it was all over the map.
Yeah, invasive species was kind of a topic back then. It was kind of a new topic, but it definitely was. As people looked around, they realized things were changing down there because of the dam as much as anything. And, the loss of sand on the beaches because of the dam in place. So there was just a lot going on. And by doing trips, as Bill said, doing trips with them, we got to know them, they got to know us. We got to know the problems and we could jointly work on issues. And it was a huge, I think a huge plus for the canyon and for the companies and the Park Service.
It was. We also sold the outfitters on quiet technology with the motors. We also, and doing some framework and jackass work so that it quiet things down. And we worked with them on a Native American program. So we started to put these things in place because it was the right thing to do. It just was the right place to go. It seemed so right to us. It was silly, but we did some convincing of other outfitters and everybody got on board eventually. It was doing these resource trips. And trips for people with disabilities was another one that we started up and we're doing and still are. So those are,
Wow.
You'll never do more work on a trip than that one. You'll also never be more satisfied. It's that kind of thing.
Yeah. You know, I think there's a lot of outfitters out there who are doing these kinds of things, and it's just like you'd never know. You're so quiet. Yeah, unsung heroes. And it sounds like partnership too, not just with each other, but with the park. So that's pretty cool that you were able to pursue that and make it happen. It's hard to imagine, I think. Well, actually, there's two things I want to say just for the sake of folks who might not be completely familiar. That when we're talking about the dam, we're talking about Glen Canyon Dam. When we talk about like motorized, like you guys were running motor trips with quiet motors, but there was a class of folks who were just row, right? And were, I guess not hostile, but preferred their style of travel. But like the question I really want to ask is, you know, not many marriages last 58 years. So it's pretty impressive to see a successful business partnership, not even in just this industry. So you guys have had great success, and you still are willing to sit within several feet of each other. So I'm, yeah, I'm curious what your thoughts are on how a successful business partnership can happen, and how you two have been able to weather what I'm sure have been some challenging times through these years.
Well, we were talking about that actually earlier. You know, there was actually three of us, which I think was a good thing because Bill kind of took over the operations, the warehouse, the guides, the things like that. I pretty much did up reservations, financial, things like that. But, you know, having both been guides, I at times would make suggestions that probably were better left unsaid and maybe vice versa. And so I will say that it wasn't the perfect marriage, but most marriages aren't perfect. But we worked really hard at trying to stay communication. And if we actually got to a point that we kind of disagreed, we went to our third partner and said, okay, here's what we think, help us out here, because we knew he'd be fair and say, hey, listen, this is what's best for the business. I think that if I had to say anything, I'd say that at the end, looking back on it, we're very glad whatever issues came up, we worked through, whatever kind of things we didn't agree on, we kind of came into a solution, because it has been a great partnership and I'm proud to be part of it, proud to be a friend of Bill's. And it's tough. We've seen a lot of Grand Canyon companies that were, you know, multiple owners that kind of fell apart over silly stuff sometimes. And so I'd say just hang in there and you know, looking back, it was a great thing to stay together.
No, without a doubt, it was that. And very fortunate to have Ron in that picture. But, you know, Bruce did the sales. I did the operations. We were in different towns. All of that helped. But all of the things that we might have thrown at each other was really pretty minor stuff. It's just that you disagree. That's all. And so it was always good to have somebody in charge of whatever the thing was, either sales or operations, that would have that final say, and you put your trust in that person. And that guy's a really trustworthy guy. So that's a precious thing to have, and keeps the partners.
You're both dependable.
Yeah, I mean, I was married for 50 years too, before I lost the gal. And then, you know, so I know some long-term stuff, and I know it pays off. I know there's some, of course, there's hardships and hard times and hard words that get said. But at the end of the day, we're still standing, and it's better than ever now.
You know, and I'd have to credit America Outdoors too for a lot of things. I mean, you know, being a small business, being, you don't really have the resources. And when America Outdoors started, I think the first one was in Albuquerque in 1990. That was kind of when they merged the East and West together. And then 91, I think we went to New Orleans. But, you know, for a small business, where else do you go? Nowadays, there's probably a lot of things on the internet you can do, but back then there wasn't. And you went to these meetings, and America Outdoors had motivational speakers and people talking about trends in the future. And you had chances to see new equipment. And there was so much going on with America Outdoors. I mean, I think for us, that was a crucial part of it, and even still is. I have I think a kind of a fun story. In 1992, I believe it was, we met in Palm Springs, and I went into a little seminar. There might have been 10 of us, and a travel agent named Raven was leading it, and he booked trips in Grand Canyon for his customers. And when we walked in, he says, "Oh, by the way, there's this new thing called the internet. I just today got rivers.com. You might want to look into it." I thought, well, that's kind of interesting. Didn't know anything about it. Went back to the office and looked into it and said, "Oh, let's get a name." And then I looked around and I said, "Let's see if anybody else at Grand Canyon had." Some had, some hadn't. And I noticed that Oars had not got a name. Oars was available. Oars.com was available. So I called George Wendt, who the award we received is named after George and Pam, some of the greatest people that worked in Grand Canyon. And I said to George, "George, have you heard of this internet? You might want to grab this thing called Oars.com." Well, he did. And for the next 10 years, anytime we were together, I never bought a beer for the next 10 years. George says, "No, I'm buying it." So I mean, it's stuff like that. And then the next, you know, then it was search engine optimization. How do you get people to go to your website? Because now that you've got one, what do you do? So America Outdoors did, you know, it played such a key role in us going forward. And then it finally changed. They added a lot of things like liability insurance, just other things that were practical. So I have to say it's been fun going to all these places over the years. It doesn't really matter.
David?
I've been every year since 1990 to these, and to be honest with you, it's fun. We take a big group to as best we can each year. It's been fun and educational. I have to lay a lot of the credit to America Outdoors, to be honest with you, for the help along the way.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, it's been great.
Yeah.
And we've had a lot of fun.
Well, thank you. We have some silent partners on the call as well, and Hillary Wicks and Karen Short, and I want to make sure they get the props for continuing that tradition and continuing to put on great shows and keep our membership relationships legitimate and evolving. So cool. That's good to hear. Well, I also have been warned to not head into the policy realm, but there is a piece of this that I want to ask you about. And it has to do with the renewal of concession contracts. So if you're operating on the Grand Canyon, you have this 10-year concession contract, and then they renew it every 10 years, and it's always kind of an ordeal. But there was a time when there was uncertainty with whether you would have some likelihood of being able to get your concession back, right? So it's called preferential right of renewal is the caveat that we now have. And as I understand it, you guys were somewhat involved in trying to retain this preferential right of renewal. Were you guys involved in that?
I'll jump in there because I probably spent more time on it than Bill did.
Mm-hmm.
This was the late 1900s, 1993, 92, somewhere right in there. And David Brown was the executive director for America Outdoors, and David knew all about this. And what was happening is 30 years before, a lot of these hotels and things like that, the big concessions bigger than us, got 30-year permits and they were paying like 1 or 2%. And these were all coming up from renewal. And some of the congressmen were saying, that's not fair. They're not paying enough. They shouldn't have this ability to renew every 30 years. So there was a concession reform became the big thing in Washington. And David Brown and we had a lobbyist, Scooch Pankin, and they kind of alerted to this was happening. And we started going back to Washington trying to talk to our congressman. And clearly, had the law not gone the way it eventually did, I think most of us would have been out of business and big corporations would be running these trips. Because what we were lobbying for, one thing in particular, that people that did outfitted services in backcountry permits, in kind of more primitive wilderness areas, should have some kind of right of preference, because it took expertise to run that. And you just didn't want that somebody bidding on that permit, and the reason they would get it is they were willing to pay a higher concession fee. It should be based on the concession fee, the Park Service, a fair one for the Park Service. But it shouldn't be that we probably have a turnover every 10 years of a new outfitter. That if somebody's doing a good job, they should be rewarded and continue to do that. And that's what the fight was about. It was pretty contentious. I laughed one time. Scooch got us going into this meeting with about 20 senators, and we thought it was going to go pretty well because most of the senators were kind of thinking that we had a good thing. And one of the senators started talking to us and he's pounding his fist on the table going, "Don't you believe these guys? They come in here with their cowboy hats and their cowboy boots and their river sandals, but they're big business." And we're sitting there, we're just shocked. It's like, so it was a pretty contentious, it was a pretty up and down turmoil. And in the end we won, but it was, gosh, I think I spent one year, I spent like 20, 30 days in Washington, which a lot of people did, just trying to lobby for us. And every day Scooch would give us an agenda and somebody new to talk to. And so it was a hard fought thing, and that is still in place to this day. And it's been the saving of most of us to continue to run during the years. Not that there's not big controversies. The Grand Canyon went through a lot of controversies, motors versus oars, allocation, private versus, and those things are still hashed out today and still come up very often. But we've kind of settled into something most people, I think, agree that it seems to work pretty well. There's things we can always do better, but at least right now we're in a kind of a nice area that for the last 10 plus years, people have been pretty satisfied with what's going on. And there is what they call adaptive management, that the Park Service can change the whole program if they see something that's out of whack. And the adaptive part of it has helped everybody get, some things weren't done very well early on, and that's been really helpful, I think.
Oh, yeah, no question.
So it's probably going to always be somewhat an issue, but it's, again, I think we're in a better place than we were for the last 20, 30 years as far as the regulations. Yeah. Not that we can let our guard down.
Contentiousness.
Even the relationship between most of the privates and the commercial has really improved over the years. And I think there's a respect for both people having the good rights to be down in the canyon.
Once again, we had taken the privates down with us just so we could start a conversation with them. And eventually, for the years I had the president of GCRO, we met with them to see, hey, how do we figure this out between the privates and the commercials? And after this meeting, in about 12 hours, Washington had been called. Now they were already drawing up this agreement. And it became this thing where they're now running exclusively the winter use and through the summer. And then we were removed from March. We used to be able to run in March, and we removed half of September, and everybody agreed to this. And that has been settled down for quite a few years now. We know that their management, ours, we're communicating one to one another. And then, so there seems to be a happier group. It was very contentious before that. Very.
You'd mentioned GCROA. That's the Grand Canyon River Outfitters Association.
Yes, sir.
And that you were the president of it. So did that come around too through this, like, it's at about the same time to push for your ability to continue to maintain your concessions? Or was there a different motivation?
This was after that. This came after that, but because their noise rate was rising, they were really being heard. So thus the meetings, thus a solution, come up with a solution. And it's been working for a long time now. And they seem happy as an organization. If you talk to their leadership, there's some, I know people here in town that will never be happy with that because we're there.
Sure.
But, we're also providing quite a service to the public. And we can back that up with all their commentary.
We kind of,
Right.
The number has changed how many outfitters there are, but there was probably 15, 16 at the time. And, we were all communicating with the Park Service individually. An issue would come up and I'd write a letter to the Park Service, what I thought, and one of the other outfitters. We always didn't even agree amongst ourselves. And we realized that we really needed to sit down and hash this stuff out and come up with solutions that we thought Park Service could live with and that we could live with, and present it as a cohesive group of people instead of individually. And that's how this first came out. And initially, whoever was serving on the board from Grand Canyon was kind of that person, and they'd bring everything back to the outfitters and say, here's what's going on and here's what we need to do. And then we finally realized, I did that for a while, Bill did it for a while, a lot of other outfitters did too. And we finally realized we really needed a paid position because there was enough going on that we needed somebody to do this for us and kind of be organizer. And that's what we've had now for probably 15 years.
Yeah.
Maybe a little more long. Yeah. And it's worked out tremendous. John Dillon is our executive director right now, does a great job. There's no way we could individually as 14 companies have the ability to deal with the park and know all these issues as somebody that we hired did. And he's just very good at it, very good at it. Cool. So I highly recommend, if you have enough outfitters, most rivers probably do have an association, I think, at this point in time.
I think so too. Yeah, it might be all volunteer, but
yeah,
let's do it.
Oh, it's all that.
Yeah, that's great. That's such interesting perspective. And I mean, of course, like I'm here because similar people came together because there was a need to have that national affiliation and that national coordination. So it's consistent. Interesting to see it be consistent. Another thing that I guess I value about this community, let's call it the America Outdoors community, I suppose, would be, that it is a community and that it tends to be this multi-generational community, right? People come for years, they start to bring their kids get married, right? Then they start to bring their kids. And you are also like now 58 years into your careers, having some multi-generational transition as well, isn't that right? Like your children are involved in the operations, and so I want to know a little bit about what it's like having this business and raising families through this, and like how it became, let's say, like how is it a blessing and how is it a curse? How's that to raise a family in this business?
The curse is that you worry that there'll be something that will get in their way that they can't carry this forward. But in my case, my son is running this thing. My grandchildren want to come on. They want to be on the paper. I said, couple more years. They're not quite there yet, but they've been downriver. They see it. They finally figure out, oh, this is what Grandpa and Dad do. And then they, and it gets a hold of them too. Maybe it's in the genetics, I don't know, but it's very real. It's very strong and powerful draw to it. And it's a beautiful business, and to raise a family in it is special. very lucky.
Yeah. You see it in Grand Canyon. There's a lot of younger family kids taking more interest in the companies, working for the companies, doing things like that. I mean, I could probably name 6 or 7 right offhand that that's happening to. My one daughter, my younger daughter, worked on the river for 8 years and married one of our guides. Great marriage, great guy. So that's another part of it. But Lindsay, my older daughter, has been active with Grand Canyon Whitewater for the past 11, 12 years when we purchased it back about that long ago. She does just a great job. So that's the good part of it. The curse is maybe I've heard some of the kids that have come back to work think they thought we should have gone out and worked just as our own job for a few years before we went to the family business, because we didn't realize what a good time, what a great business the family business was. And so I think that's an important, you don't want to force your kids into it. You want them to make the decision, and you want them to maybe have some other experiences first, so they kind of know what real work in the like, not ours is real work obviously, but they obviously realize what it's like just in the regular workforce, and how nice it is to work for a river company in Grand Canyon. So, yeah,
little perspective.
It's not always a perfect transition, but we kind of fell in love with the business, and I think a lot of our kids have done the same thing. I mean, what more could you ask for working in the Grand Canyon, taking people down an adventure that they'll remember for the rest of their lives, that people still talk about it when you say, oh, I did that back in 1981. That was the greatest trip we ever went on. What more could you ask for?
Absolutely. And our kids have, we didn't stop there. They have educations. My son's an architect. My daughter has their own business, speech path thing. And so they've said to me, we watched you struggle. It was a daily thing a lot of times there in our house, but we also see where you are now. We appreciate that, and we want to be that. We want to go be in business. We want to take that challenge on. So they see it, and that downside, I don't know. Just keep going, doing what you have to do. That's business.
Every once in a while, I'll just sit down and read, we, like all the companies, send out a questionnaire to people. A lot of people do them online at TripAdvisor and things like that. But, if I was having a bad day or anything, once in a while, I just sit down and I could read 20 or 30 questionnaires and kind of go, now I realize why. I remember why we do this. I remember why we work so hard, and remember why it's such an important thing, because you read the questionnaires and it's just, life-changing is maybe too strong a word, but for people, it changes their perspective. And I think it's helpful for them. They're advocates for the canyon, for the Park Service. They just become interested in that type of thing, what's going on in that environment. And it's just like I said, it's a great thing to be a part of.
You could be making widgets in Houston. Right. Have your widget making company.
Did that.
Or you could be spending your summers in the Grand Canyon. There was a politician, I can't remember his name, but I got to see him speak at something called the National Landscape Conservation System Summit, and he described, like, let me see if I can recall how he did this. He's like, that when you look out across a landscape and you get that, like, just that feeling from looking at it, and you can, like, close your eyes and think of that space now, probably the Grand Canyon for you. And he says, like, that is the spirit of that place, like resonating, like, within your own spirit. And so I'm not particularly spiritual, but I do know that feeling, right? And there's something to like having an extended engagement with a place that is a life-altering experience and does stick with you and changes your ethic and probably puts you on a different path in your life. So I just think that's really something that, I mean, we know it, that this is the value of the business, but that you're able to impart that on so many guests over so many years. And so I'm curious if there are like some guests who stand out a little bit as for whom this trip might have been particularly impactful, or folks who came back to guide for you because they had a really good trip with you, or a good trip with somebody else.
We have a group right now where 4 to 6 people show up every year on a trip at the end of the season for Grand Canyon Whitewater. And it's a phenomenon that I hadn't seen. One, you can only go once a year, so there's that. But these guys saw what we saw apparently. It got a hold of them. It's very real. And you know, we break out the instruments. We're dancing in the moonlight along the river. I mean, if you can find those days, you should live those days, as many as you can. And that's what we're bringing. And they're now bringing that too. They're some of our best, I want to say, salesmen. They get online. They do the whole, thing I don't know anything about, and they just go ape. And that's us. This is what we want to encourage. This is the thing that you guys get it. Let's spread that, because it's very valuable. If people could see a river and see just the value in just that, instead of seeing numbers go by, dollar signs go by, instead of that, if they can just really get that in their heart, they'll be on the team that protects it. That's the point of our whole national park system, isn't it? I mean, it's very important to save these places because they give that to us.
I was on a trip about 4 years ago, and there was 3 siblings that as kids had gone down with their parents down the Grand Canyon. And here they are, all the 3 of them back. They all had kids. There was about 9 of them in total. And they were repeating that. And they said, we'd been planning this for years, from the trip they did. So it's good to see. The other thing that happens is you see people that come down. My wife goes on most of all the trips I go on in the last few years, well, many years. And there was a lady that is probably in her 70s, and she clearly, the first day, you could just see she was out of her element. And my wife went over that night to help her set up her camp and stuff, and got talking to her, and she said, well, her husband wouldn't go. He went to Las Vegas, but she was bound and determined to go on this trip. She got more out of that trip than somebody that backpacks and hikes and do things all the time. To her, it was just a life-changing experience for her, because it was just so much out of her element and normal. And I think that's really great that we still get those people, a lot of those people, because they hear about it. They know it's kind of a little bit out of their element. They're pressing their comfort level somewhat. And those people in the end, I think, remember that trip more than anybody else.
They're different 3 days into the trip than they were when they started. 2 to 3 days in, you start to see them. Oh my, now it becomes, holy crap, this is something special. And then they loosen up, and then it becomes, then they embrace it. Yeah.
That's great. You guys have blown past normal retirement age. Maybe not blown past. You're a little past your regular retirement age. But I'm asking this question in a real awkward way. But like the thing here is like, what's in store for you? Do you want to keep staying with these businesses as long as you can get up in the morning? Do you want to lay it down at some point and go get on some rivers in Borneo? What's the
second one?
What's the future for you in the business? Yeah, Borneo. Yeah.
You want to shoot at that one?
Well, yeah, I mean, I've already hit Australia and New Zealand, and now I want to go to Borneo. This is the thing that it also provides.
Literally Borneo.
Is there's good stuff there. I've already heard about them.
Yeah,
anyway, it's the other thing that it provides is you have time to travel in the winter, so it opens up that other door to go find rivers, because they are everywhere, and they're just the best thing we have on our planet. They feed the whole ecological system. They're good for the oceans and the seas if we didn't muck them up. And all of that kind of stuff leads to its own. I mean, we've been following this. We've been running rivers all over the world. What can I say? That's its other benefit here.
Yeah, I think it's, we've done a lot of things along, taken time out and done a lot of things along, so I don't have any regrets, but I think it's time for both of us. Bill is probably a little more retired than I am. I'm trying to get there.
Me too.
I'm trying to catch up fast. So we are going to step back. I think there was times when we jumped back in a little bit, like COVID, for the COVID scenario when the park was closed for a couple of months to start out with. We were making up it as we went along what to do about reservations, rebooking, refunds, and all those things. So I think our expertise to come in at that point in time and just kind of help with what can be done, what the options are, and what we might have done in the past are helpful. But there is clearly a time to turn it over to the younger crowd. We're both at that stage. I think we can agree to that one.
And they're very tuned in to what we have here. And they want to continue that. They want to take care of the river community, the place, the Park Service. Flagstaff itself has a large population of guides here. So they're into the things that have already been created and pushed out there community-wise as well. And they're proud of it. And we're proud of that they are. And so they'll carry on.
Great. That's great.
Aaron, when you asked about guests, I heard you wanted to hear who the famous people we take down the river.
My very next question.
I would say I'm not going to do that one, but I'll take on the most famous person we almost took down the river. About 15, 20 years ago, I got a call from Disney, and Mickey Mouse was a kind of adventure character when they first created him in the 30s, and he did adventure things, and they decided Mickey had become a little too comfortable with retirement, that they decided they were going to send Mickey into adventure things and develop a TV show on Mickey doing adventure stuff. And the first one they were going to do is they wanted to take Mickey down the Grand Canyon. So they asked if we could do that. And I thought, I don't know why not. We could probably do that. And I worked for a couple of weeks with a lady trying to figure out the logistics and things like that. And then they decided that they were going to have Mickey come in on a mule and then get on the river trip, because that would be part of that. And so I went to the South Rim. I talked to the head wrangler, and he goes, yeah, I've got some mules that could care less what's on their back. He says, yeah, we can do that. So we worked on this for about 2 months, and finally it was like we were ready to kind of firm this up. They were going to go in June, and they said, we're going to bring some kids on the river with families and kids along the trip too. And you realize they cannot see Mickey out of costume. And I go, what now? Well, Mickey has to, when Mickey gets off the river, he's got to go straight to a tent, whether it's lunch or the evening, and he can't come out of the tent until we get back on the river or do anything. He has to be confined in his tent or be in costume. And I said, Mickey on a late June Grand Canyon raft trip, wearing that costume and then going into a tent in the middle for lunch.
I said, dead Mickey.
I said, this won't go very well. Advertising wise, we just killed Mickey Mouse on the river. Heat stroke. Mickey dies of heat stroke.
Bad
Grand Canyon raft trip. So we just really could never figure a way around that. And so Mickey didn't end up going down the river with us.
That's probably for the best. So we have a couple people who have their hands up, and I want to see if we can work the logistics of this out. So some of our producers, whether it's Karen or Hillary, I think can unmute Peter Abell or Michael Cohen, and we can have them ask their questions or make their comments. So I'm going to just sort of go quiet and see if that just happens.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Can you hear me right now?
I can.
Excellent. Yeah, this is Michael Cohen with Santa Barbara Adventure Company. When I saw this come up on the email, I was bound and determined to make time to see this. And Bill and Bruce, I need you to know that you are just the greatest role models in my life, and that since you have taken me under your wing when I first came to AO in whatever year, 2010 it was, and showed me the way of, like the two river Obi-Wans that you were, that showed me the way of this great community and how deep and important it is. Not you guys keep talking about the Grand Canyon, but it's important to society. What you are doing is good to the greater good of people in the world. So on every AO river trip, we do a session at the end where we talk about our community and how important it is that we keep going. And I say this phrase every time, that we are standing on the shoulders of giants. And I'm talking about you too. And I just am so moved to see you here and honored like this. And I just want you guys to know that you mean the world to me, and that you are, if I could be half as incredible as you are in my path and career, you inspire me to do better in my building of my business and the building of my community. So thank you. I mean, thank you so much. And one of the things I've learned from you is how incredibly generous you are to the community. I mean, taking the lonely guy in your midst, Grand Canyon trips, and so how you pay and reward your staff. I have followed those lessons. So I just cannot say enough how grateful I am for you two to be my role model. And I mean, thank you so much. I really am grateful.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you, Michael.
I had the
Very
pleasure
kind.
of doing one of the oars trips at the end of the year, the donation fund trips, and being on the river with Michael can't be much more fun than
Yeah,
100%.
some people don't think that, that's for sure. But the truth is that you two are just really, when you're in honor of this award, you guys really deserve it. And thank you for being so amazing to all of us.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you, Michael. Peter, if you want, I believe that you can unmute yourself and chime in.
Can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, I can hear you.
I just wanted to say I felt this was so important. I took time out from my son's wedding celebration, which is happening tomorrow, to sit and listen to you all talk. And I hit it by
It's
mistake.
recorded for posterity.
Yes, well, none of them would work at the business, but what the hell? Thank you all.
Thank you, Peter.
Thank you.
And we'll see you this year at the next meeting.
Absolutely.
There you go.
One of the things Michael mentioned that I think is worth mentioning, we started maybe 30 years ago, about the late 90s, we started a pension plan. And it was another one of those things we thought, gosh, as a guide, you don't really have a savings, what could we do to encourage our guides to stay with us, get a savings account rolling along and start. So we started a pension plan, and our goal was it was kind of a profit sharing plan is what we would call it. And our goal was to put 50 for anybody that worked for us, and there's some qualifications. You have to work 1 year to start the plan, and then you have to work 3 years. That if you quit after that, then all the money that you put into that we put into the plan is yours. There's a lot of details on that and how we did it, but our goal was to put 15% of our gross revenue, or actually, no, it's not true. 15% of their wages as an additional bonus into this pension plan. And we started doing it. And at first there was, it was kind of one of these things, thank you very much, but I don't know that they saw the benefit until it started to build up over a couple of years. And then it became something that they really look forward to. And out of all the years, I think there were 3 years we put down like 5 and 10%. One of them was COVID year when we were half closed, but 90% of the years we put the 15% in it. And I just looked at it the other day. We have 85 participants in the plan, and the average money in the plan is almost $85,000. I did the math, and it was like just short of 7 million in this pension plan. And I'm thinking, it's definitely after about 10 years for some of the guides, as they started building up money in the pension plan, they started taking a different feel and look to it, like what it meant to them. And I think, I think a lot of companies could benefit by doing that. And it was a little bit of a hardship when we started out, taking 15% of the gross wages and putting them into a plan that did like that. But to me, it's one of the better things we ever did. And I'd encourage anybody to look in that. And if they want some more details, I'd be willing to share what we did with anybody, because I think it's a great way to reward your employees and also help young employees think about the future and retirement, even though they're a long way from it.
And allows them to become more professional too in what they're doing. It buys that time. That's important, time in this business. If you get a lot of time on river with all those people, you'll get it, but you need the time. And this helps that quite a bit, actually. So we're pretty proud of that one.
I think it's one of the, I think, let's say like predominant aspects of your business that is broadly appreciated is how staff are treated at your operations. So that's like an incredible legacy. And it's great to hear from Michael and others that it's not just a legacy, it's actually potentially a business practice that's spreading. So how cool is that? Thank you. We are up against it. So we've gone through our time. And for folks who enjoyed this time and this webinar, I encourage you to keep track of webinars that we have in the near future. So we'll be talking about taking advantage of solar energy credits with Kara Kolovich on April 27th at 2 o'clock Eastern. Following that, we'll have a session using AI in your marketing efforts on May 3rd. So we still have 2 more webinars coming up in this webinar season, and I hope to see you for those. And I want to appreciate you, Bruce and Bill, for putting this time together, for continuing to show up for interviews and for the industry. We really value our time with you, and this has been just an enlightening and heartening conversation to have. And I'm so glad to know that businesses like the ones that you stand up can be successful, can have legs, and really can have much promise when you are looking down the road in the future. Thank you for all you've done.
Thank you.
Thank you, Aaron. Appreciate it.
It was great.
Yeah. Look forward to seeing you. I'm going to get myself down there soon. And,
See you
and so we'll knock on both your doors.
Sounds good.
Great. Well, thank you. Take care, everyone.
Take care.
And have a great season. We'll see you soon.
Thank you.